Let's take a closer look now at the presidential campaign. And for that, we turn to Philip Bump, political reporter for The Washington Post. Philip, good morning.
Good morning.
What do you make of this nastiness on the Democratic side suddenly after all this time? And what effect do you think it could have on the potential nominee?
I think it was sort of overdue, honestly. I think Bernie Sanders is realizing that he is running in a tighter race than he probably expected and now is throwing harder punches. I don't think over the long term this is going to do much to affect the outcome of November, simply because we saw this in 2008. It was a much more rancorous campaign. It was a much closer campaign then, and both sides got over it, and Barack Obama was elected easily.
I mean, he's been on a string of wins, though.
Right.
He's won the last couple of races.
Right.
Does that change anything in your mind?
It really doesn't, and a lot of Bernie Sanders advocates would argue vociferously with me about that. But he's won states that he really should have won, that demographically were the sorts of states he'd been winning and will probably continue to win today in Wyoming. But I think that streak is probably going to come to an end now.
Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump all have pretty strong New York ties.
Right.
Do you think that's going to affect this primary here?
I think it makes it very interesting. You know, we're not used here in New York to having a sort of a contested primary. If you look in 2012, the Republican primary in the city of New York had 25,000 people voting it, which is remarkably low, right? It's like almost nobody. So it's exciting from that standpoint. I don't know that anyone's New Yorkness will outweigh anyone else's, except that I think Donald Trump has an advantage over a Ted Cruz.
We had Senator Lindsey Graham on the show yesterday, and I think even he is surprised that he is getting behind Ted Cruz at this point.
Right.
When do you think the establishment will either have to get behind Donald Trump or force other actions like a contested convention?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Republican establishment is torn because they don't really like Ted Cruz, to your point about Lindsey Graham, who's sort of shocked that he's in this spot. They don't like Donald Trump, but they do want to try and win in November, right? And so I think that they are hoping that the convention will resolve who the nominee is. They can all unite behind that person. But I think that they have a much bigger problem in terms of fragmentation of the base. Trump's fans are very, very strong fans of Donald Trump. They're not going to like someone else being the nominee.
Paul Ryan released a video on his website yesterday that to a lot of people played a lot like a campaign ad. Said he doesn't want the nomination, et cetera. But is he an X factor out there at this point?
I think that there is sort of a big, giant X factor, which is someone else. Paul Ryan could fit into that mix. But again, the Republican Party, the last time we saw a contested convention was before social media, before a lot of media attention. It's going to be very hard for the Republican Party to steal the nomination from someone that got votes and give it to someone who didn't.
Kasich is still in this race. Why is he someone that Republicans are not talking more about at this point?
I think it's solely because what they want to do is they want to keep Donald Trump from winning. And because Kasich is a distant third, they want to keep that 1237 number that was just said. The only race is Donald Trump getting to that number. Ted Cruz winning races keeps him from getting there. John Kasich winning races keeps him from getting there, except John Kasich isn't winning any races. So people instead are endorsing Ted Cruz.
We talked about how contested New York is, which is very different for the state. How important is New York at this point?
It's very important on the Republican side. Donald Trump, one of the reasons he's not campaigning in California is he wants to lock down the delegates in New York. Again, he needs to get to that 1237. On the Democratic side, it's not really important at all. Even if Bernie Sanders wins by a couple of points, it doesn't matter. The whole race on the Democratic side is the delegate count. Bernie Sanders is way, way behind, more than twice what Hillary Clinton was behind in 2008 at her worst. There's almost no way he can catch up, barring some sort of amazing, amazing occurrence. So it's much more important on the Republican side.
It's so interesting to even watch the politics now of who they are supporting at this point.
Yeah.
Philip Bump, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Tomorrow morning on Face the Nation here on CBS, John Dickerson's guests will include presidential candidates Bernie Sanders and John Kasich.